The sky above Jefferson Ridge was stained with thick smoke as fires devoured the outer edge of the small mountain town. A strange silence followed the chaos, the kind that made your skin crawl. Birds no longer chirped. Dogs no longer barked. All that remained was the low moan of the undead drifting in from the pine forest. Claire Mercer gripped her father's old shotgun tighter, her knuckles white beneath the soot and sweat. She'd grown up in this town, spent summers hiking its wooded trails, winters sledding down the hills. Now, she stood in the middle of Main Street, surrounded by the burned-out husks of once thriving shops and homes. Jefferson Ridge was dying. No, it was already dead. What remained was just a battleground for those still breathing. "Claire, we have to move," barked Marcus Wynn, former firefighter, now the reluctant leader of the remaining townsfolk. He adjusted the rifle slung over his back and motioned toward the alleyway behind the collapsed diner. "They're coming from the north side. Fast." Claire turned and ran with him, boots crunching on broken glass. The group behind them, no more than 15 people, stumbled along in exhaustion and fear. Some carried children. Others dragged makeshift weapons. No one spoke. No one had to. The mission was clear: survive another hour. Another block. Another breath. Behind them, the groans grew louder. They ducked into the alley. Claire helped an older man over a fallen trash bin, then glanced back just in time to see the first wave of zombies spilling into the street. Pale, bloody, ravenous. One sprinted ahead of the others, arms flailing, eyes locked on its prey. "Move, move!" Marcus shouted. Claire raised her shotgun, aiming carefully before firing. The blast echoed, and the creature crumpled, but more took its place. There was no time to check if the others made it through. The group kept running until they reached a half-collapsed auto repair shop at the end of the block. Marcus shoved open the garage door with a grunt. "Inside, quick!" They poured in. Claire was the last one through, pulling the door shut behind her and sliding a steel pipe into the locking brackets. They were safe, for now. The survivors huddled inside the dark garage. Someone lit a small oil lantern. The faint glow revealed faces lined with dirt, sweat, and hopelessness. "Is this it?" whispered Jenna, a teenager with tear-streaked cheeks. "Is this all that's left of Jefferson Ridge?" "No," Claire said firmly. "There are still people out there. There has to be." Marcus knelt beside an old workbench, spreading out a worn map of the town. "They're coming faster than before," he said. "They're learning our movements. We lost 2 people last night. We can't stay here another night." "They've boxed us in," muttered Peter, the mechanic. "Only way out is through the rail tunnel." Claire looked up sharply. "The tunnel's sealed." "Has been for years." "Not anymore," Marcus replied. "They blew it open. It's unstable, but passable, if we move fast and don't get trapped." Murmurs rippled through the group. The rail tunnel ran beneath the mountain, a cold, narrow artery of rusted steel and darkness. If it collapsed while they were inside. "Better than dying out here," Claire muttered. A crash echoed from outside. Something slammed against the garage door. Hard. Everyone froze. Another bang. Then another. Claire backed away slowly, raising her shotgun again. "They found us." "Back door." Marcus barked. "Move, now." They scattered. Peter and Jenna shoved open the back exit. The group spilled out into the narrow alley behind the garage, only to find another small pack of zombies approaching from the shadows. Claire didn't hesitate. She fired once, twice. Marcus used the butt of his rifle to knock one to the ground. Peter grabbed a crowbar from his belt and swung it wildly. It wasn't a coordinated fight. It was chaos, but they pushed through. Panting, bruised, and bleeding, they finally reached the edge of the rail yard. The tunnel entrance loomed like the mouth of a sleeping beast. Claire stared into the dark and tightened her grip on the shotgun. "We go in," she said. "Now." Behind them, more groans echoed through the night. And then, as if something had sensed their decision, a distant siren blared from the far end of the valley. A relic from the old emergency systems. It hadn't sounded in weeks. The group froze. Claire's heart pounded. What the hell was that? Marcus whispered. I don't know, Claire said, voice low. But it means someone's still out there. And maybe, just maybe, not all hope was lost. End of Part 1. Part 2 title, Into the Tunnel. Let me know when you're ready, and I'll continue. The tunnel loomed ahead like a throat carved into the mountain, cold, black, and silent. A rusted rail sign swung loosely in the wind, creaking above the entrance like a warning no one could read anymore. Claire hesitated for just a breath, then stepped inside, the steel barrel of her shotgun leading the way. Behind her, the others followed in silence, their footsteps muffled on gravel and rusted tracks. Marcus brought up the rear, glancing behind them as if the shadows might lunge at any moment. The siren they'd heard earlier had faded, but its echo still lingered in his ears. I don't like this, he muttered. Too quiet. It's always quiet before the worst, Claire whispered. The tunnel swallowed them whole. Light vanished within seconds, replaced by the flickering beam of a dying flashlight and the dim glow from Peter's improvised lantern. The group walked in tight formation, every pair of eyes scanning the walls, the ground, the dark ahead. Any sound, a pebble skittering, the drip of water, set hearts racing. Claire felt the cold creep through her clothes. The deeper they went, the heavier the air became, as though the mountain itself were bearing down on them. Dust floated through the beams of light, disturbed by their passage. The rails were slick with moisture. They had no idea how deep it went or what waited inside. Suddenly, Jenna stopped short, pointing down. What's that? Claire looked. Something wet and dark smeared the rails. It wasn't rust. Blood, Peter said grimly. Fresh, Marcus added. Too fresh. The group pressed on, slower now, more alert. Around the next bend, they saw it, what remained of another survivor group. Limbs torn apart. Clothing shredded. A broken radio, still hissing static, lay against the wall. One figure lay slumped against a rusted ladder leading up through a maintenance shaft. Claire knelt beside the body. The face was half gone, but the eyes still held terror. She closed them gently. We're not the first to come through here. But we'll be the last if we don't move, Marcus said, checking his ammo. Peter glanced toward the shaft. Maybe it's safer topside? No way, Marcus replied. We've no idea where it leads. We stick to the plan. They moved on, breath held, feet silent. The tunnel stretched on endlessly, a ribcage of steel and stone that pressed in from all sides. Then, without warning, a metallic clang echoed behind them. They spun. Lights flashed back. Nothing. Then a second clang, closer. Peter raised the lantern higher. Something's following us. Keep moving, Marcus ordered. They broke into a light jog, pushing ahead, nerves fraying. Ahead, the tunnel curved and narrowed. They reached a section where the roof had partially collapsed. Steel beams jutted like ribs. Rubble littered the path. Claire squeezed through first, the others following one at a time. Jenna stumbled, and a beam fell from above with a thunderous crash. It blocked the way back. Go! Go! Marcus shouted. We're committed now. As if on cue, a high-pitched screech rang out behind them, followed by the unmistakable sound of claws scraping on steel. They're inside the tunnel, Claire hissed. Not just the slow, dragging undead. These were different. Faster. Hunting them. The group bolted forward through the crumbling path. The lantern flickered and died. Darkness. Someone screamed. Claire turned and fired blindly into the black, her ears ringing from the blast. A body fell with a wet thud. Something had gotten too close. Keep going! Marcus shouted, his voice ragged. Almost there. Ahead, a faint glimmer of light appeared. The other side. An exit. But just before they reached it, Claire saw them, creatures more feral than the usual infected. They clung to the walls like spiders, eyes glowing faintly in the dark. Twisted experiments of nature or evolution. They'd adapted to the shadows, using silence and speed as their weapons. Claire fired again. One shrieked and fell. Another leapt at Marcus but was batted away by the stock of his rifle. Jenna and Peter broke through the tunnel's end, emerging into a moonlit clearing beyond the mountain. Claire, Marcus, and the last few survivors tumbled out after them. Claire turned and threw a flare into the tunnel, the red light revealing dozens of crawling undead swarming forward. "Seal it!" Marcus yelled. Peter slammed the old steel gate down and drove a metal pipe through the latch. The creatures slammed against the bars, shrieking, but they held, for now. The group collapsed in the grass, gasping for breath beneath a canopy of stars. Behind them, the tunnel growled like a living thing. "We made it," Jenna whispered. "We actually made it." Claire looked around the open field, the distant tree line, the shadows moving beyond the moonlight. "No," she said grimly. "This was the easy part." And far off, through the trees, the emergency siren blared again, closer this time. End of Part 2. Part 3 title, The Stranger and the Signal. Let me know when you're ready for the next. Dawn crept over the treetops with a pale, cold light, casting long shadows across the clearing. The group had barely slept, too shaken by what they had seen in the tunnel, too haunted by what they had barely escaped. The creatures inside hadn't behaved like ordinary zombies. They had moved with purpose. Coordination. Hunger. And worst of all, they had followed them. Claire sat on a moss-covered rock, wiping down her shotgun with a rag. Her hands shook despite the warm morning air. Marcus crouched nearby, studying a rusted road sign buried in the undergrowth. The words were barely legible, Bell Point, 2 miles. "That's where the signal came from," he said. "You're sure?" Claire asked. He nodded. "Direction's right. We follow the tree line, keep low. Should reach it by sundown." Jenna joined them, clutching a cracked walkie-talkie. "I've been scanning all morning," she said. "Just static. Nothing else." Claire took the radio and adjusted the dial carefully. Nothing. Then, just for a second, a burst of distorted sound. A voice. "If anyone can hear this, Bell Point, still fighting, repeat, still fighting." And then, silence again. "It's them," Claire said. "Someone's alive out there. They're calling for help." "Or it's a trap," Peter grumbled. He stood watch at the edge of the woods, crowbar ready, eyes scanning the horizon. "Could be bait." "You saw what those things were like in the tunnel. Smarter. Organized. What if they're using voices now to lure people in?" Claire didn't answer. The idea chilled her, but the hope in that voice had sounded real. They moved by mid-morning, weaving through the trees in single file. The woods were quiet, but not dead. Birds returned with cautious chirps. A breeze rattled the branches. It felt almost normal, until they saw the first body. It was hanging from a tree limb, wrapped in vines, torn to pieces, chest hollowed out. A crude sign had been nailed into the bark beside it. 3 words, scrawled in charcoal. "Turn back now." Marcus stared at it, jaw tight. "We keep going." They passed 3 more signs. One with bloodied handprints. One with bullet holes. One burned halfway through. But still, they pushed on. By mid-afternoon, they reached the outskirts of Bell Point. What was once a farming town had become a battlefield. Smoke drifted lazily from smoldering ruins. Corpses littered the streets, some human, some not. And atop the church tower, a makeshift antenna buzzed faintly, emitting that same repeating signal. Marcus raised his binoculars. "There," he whispered. "Someone's alive." A figure moved along the roof, human, armed. Watching. They approached slowly, hands raised, no sudden movements. The streets felt haunted. Claire counted 4 burned-out cars and 3 broken windows before the figure finally stepped down from the rooftop and met them in the square. He was tall, lean, and heavily armed. A long scar ran from his ear to his collarbone, and his eyes never stopped scanning. He kept his rifle lowered, but not by much. "You came because of the signal," he said flatly. "You're lucky to be breathing." "We're looking for a safe place," Claire said. "Somewhere people are still fighting." He didn't smile. "There's no such place. But if you're willing to bleed, you can stay. Name's Roke." Claire introduced the group. Roke motioned for them to follow. He led them into an old municipal building turned into a fortified shelter. Inside were 6 more survivors, most of them injured or exhausted. They'd been holding Bell Point for 3 weeks, barely. "There were more of us," Roke explained. "We tried to reach a military outpost 10 miles north. Never made it. Whatever you saw in the tunnel, it's not isolated. These things are changing." "Faster," Claire said. "Smarter." Roke nodded grimly. "And more organized. They don't just feed anymore. They hunt. And they send scouts ahead." Marcus frowned. "Scouts? Like reconnaissance?" "Yeah," Roke replied. "Small groups. They observe, then vanish. And when the horde comes, they hit hard. They've learned how to flank. Herd us into traps. Like wolves." Jenna clutched her jacket tighter. "What do we do?" Roke walked to a cover table and pulled off a tarp, revealing a detailed map. Dozens of red X's covered the region. "We hit them first." Claire stepped closer. "You want to go on the offensive?" "It's the only way," Roke said. "We can't keep running. We find their nest, where these mutations are coming from, and burn it down." The silence that followed was heavy with tension. Peter looked uneasy. Jenna looked terrified. "But Claire?" She nodded. "We'll fight." That night, the survivors of Jefferson Ridge slept inside reinforced walls. But sleep didn't come easy. Outside, the night stretched long and cold. And somewhere beyond the treeline, in the dark, the hunters were already moving. End of Part 3. Part 4 title, The First Strike. Let me know when you're ready for the next. Morning in Bell Point brought no peace. The sun rose behind thick clouds, casting the town in a gray, dismal light. Smoke still drifted from the ruins of yesterday's battles. In the municipal building, the survivors gathered around Roke's map. The plan was risky, dangerous enough to border on suicidal, but Claire knew he was right. They couldn't keep running. Not anymore. Roke pointed to a red circle drawn in the hills east of Bell Point. "That's where we think the nest is. An old hydroelectric station. Abandoned before the outbreak. Now, it's crawling with them. Scouts, infected, something bigger." "How do you know that's their center?" Marcus asked. "Because every time we lose someone, they disappear in that direction. And the signal we intercepted, someone else tried broadcasting from there last week. It was cut off mid-message. They didn't make it." Claire leaned in. "So we go in. Small team. Fast. Light. We hit them hard and burn the place down." Roke nodded. "Exactly. No heroics. Plant the charges. Get out." Peter didn't look convinced. "What if they're waiting for us?" "They are," Roke said simply. "But they won't expect us to attack." Jenna fidgeted with her radio, biting her lip. "What if there are people inside that station?" "Then we do what we can to save them," Claire said. "But we finished the mission." The team assembled their gear. Claire strapped 2 extra shells to her shotgun, checked her sidearm, and secured the makeshift grenade Roke had given her. Marcus carried the explosives. Peter took the scoped rifle, and Jenna handled comms. Roke moved like he'd done this before, no wasted motion, no fear. By midday, they were hiking through the forested slope toward the hydro station. The woods felt wrong. Too quiet. Even the birds refused to sing. Claire kept her shotgun raised, sweeping the trees for movement. Something about the air here, it was thick. Like it remembered violence. As they neared the ridge, they saw it, the old facility, tucked between two cliffs, its concrete walls cracked and overgrown. Vines curled around security lights. The gate was twisted open. No guards. No moans. No visible infected. That's not good, Peter muttered. Why is it never good when it's quiet? They crept down the slope and crossed into the courtyard. Dead vehicles lay rusting in place. A shattered window gaped like a wound in the building's side. Marcus set to work planting charges along the structural beams while Claire, Roque, and Jenna moved room to room, clearing the area. Inside, they found evidence of other survivors, old sleeping bags, empty ration cans, scribbled notes on crumbling walls. And blood. Lots of it. Trails led deeper into the station, toward the generator room. That's when they heard it. Not a growl. Not a groan. A clicking sound. Rhythmic. Repeating. Like claws on concrete. Contact, Roque whispered. Back wall. Claire turned, and froze. The creature that stepped from the shadows wasn't like the others. It was taller, leaner, hunched on all fours like a predator. Its eyes glowed faint green, and jagged bone-like spines protruded from its back. It sniffed the air and let out a low, guttural hiss. Then it lunged. Claire dove aside just as it struck. Roque fired twice, hitting its center mass, but it didn't stop. It slammed into him, throwing him against the wall. Jenna screamed. Claire rose and fired point blank. The shot ripped through its shoulder, slowing it just enough for Roque to stab it in the throat. The creature fell, twitching. But the clicking hadn't stopped. More were coming. All charges placed. Marcus shouted, racing into the room. Fall back. Claire ordered. Now. They ran. Through the darkened halls, past the shattered windows, into the courtyard. Behind them, the air filled with that haunting rhythm, click click click. Dozens of them. Crawling through vents, holes in the walls, dropping from ceilings. Peter turned to cover their retreat, his rifle dropping too before they reached him. Roque tossed smoke grenades, masking their escape. Remotes ready, Marcus said as they reached the tree line. Not yet, Claire shouted. Wait until. Then they heard it. A human scream. Faint, from inside the station. Help! Jenna froze. Someone's still in there. Claire looked back. The smoke was thick, the shapes inside shifting fast. Roque clenched his jaw. We don't have time. Claire made a choice. She ran. Dove back into the courtyard. Past the dead creature. Slid through the smoke. Found a young man trapped under debris, bloodied, dazed. I've got you, she said, lifting the beam with a grunt. He was light. Barely able to stand. Together, they stumbled out just as the creatures charged again. Now! Claire screamed. Marcus hit the trigger. The hydro station erupted behind them, fireball, concrete, bone. The shockwave knocked them flat. Silence returned. Smoke curled into the sky. Claire turned to the boy she'd rescued. Who are you? He coughed, eyes wide. Name's Leo. I was with the recon team. They experimented on the infected. Tried to control them. They made something worse. Claire looked toward the burning ruin. Her stomach twisted. This wasn't the end. It was only the beginning. End of Part 4. Part 5 title, The Truth About Control. Let me know when you're ready for the next. Smoke from the destroyed hydro station still lingered in the air as Claire helped Leo down the hill. The others moved cautiously, weapons drawn, eyes scanning for any signs that the nightmare hadn't ended with the explosion. But Claire knew better. She could feel it deep in her gut, whatever had started in that facility was far from over. At the base camp, Roke stitched a gash on his shoulder without so much as a grunt. Marcus stood guard. Jenna flipped through frequencies on the radio, listening for chatter. Claire brought Leo into the bunker and gave him water. His hands shook as he drank. "Start talking," Roke said without looking up. Leo leaned against the wall, his voice hoarse. "We were scientists, sort of. A private group, Echelon Biosystems. Funded by what was left of the military. They wanted a solution to the outbreak. A way to control the infected." "You're saying someone actually tried to weaponize the undead?" Marcus asked, incredulous. Leo nodded. "Not just weaponize, dominate. They thought if they could control the horde, they could turn the tide. Use them against rival factions, clear cities, reclaim land. But something went wrong." Claire leaned in, her voice low. "What exactly did you do?" "We started with behavioral implants. Neurological interference tech. Some of them responded, but others," he trailed off. "They changed. Became smarter. Faster. More coordinated. The spine ones? We didn't create them. We unlocked them." Jenna's eyes widened. "You mean those things were already inside the infected?" Leo nodded slowly. "It's like they were evolving. The tech just sped it up. Made them more dangerous. More organized." Roke cursed under his breath. "How many more facilities are there?" "Two that I know of. One's gone dark, probably overrun. The other? I think it's still operational. They were building a command node, something to link them together, control them remotely." Marcus slammed his hand on the table. "This is insanity. You people brought this on us." Leo raised his hands. "I didn't sign up to unleash hell. I joined to find a cure. But once I realized what they were really doing, I tried to stop it. That's why they locked me in that station." Claire sat back, her mind racing. If there's a control node still working, that means they could be organizing the horde. Sending them in waves. Making decisions. Tactics. Roke nodded grimly. "Which explains the ambush patterns. The coordinated attacks. We're not dealing with dumb monsters anymore." Silence settled over the room. Then Claire stood. "Where's the remaining facility?" she asked. Leo hesitated. "It's northwest of here. An old government site in the canyon. They call it Site Omega. It's buried beneath the rock, heavily fortified." Roke tapped his knife on the table, thinking. "That's a 2-day march, maybe more. Through rough terrain. And likely crawling with undead," Marcus added. Claire looked around the room. "But if we take it out, we destroy the tech. We sever the link. Maybe it buys us time. Maybe it even stops the horde." Peter, who had been silent since the firefight, finally spoke. "Or maybe we find more of those spine things. Maybe worse." Leo didn't deny it. Still, Claire's decision was made. "We move at dawn. Pack light. Silent travel. If we're lucky, we get close without drawing attention." Roke grinned. "We're never lucky." Later that night, the group sat around a low campfire, burning dry scraps and cooking the last of their canned stew. No one spoke much. They all knew what was coming. Claire sat with Leo, watching the flames. "You still believe there's a cure?" she asked. "I want to," Leo said quietly. "But what we've done, maybe we've passed the point of return." Claire looked at him, her eyes hard. "Then we make sure it doesn't get worse. Even if we can't fix it, we fight. That's the only way forward." Jenna sat polishing her radio, trying to boost the range. "If Omega has any kind of comms relay, I might be able to jam it. Or send out a warning. Let other groups know what's coming." Roke raised his can. "To jamming evil science experiments." The others chuckled, but the laughter faded quickly. The night was quiet again. Too quiet. Even the wind felt cautious. Then a low thud echoed from the forest. They froze. Another thud. Heavier. Closer. Claire stood slowly, grabbing her shotgun. Everyone up. We're not alone. From the trees, something moved. Not fast. Not erratic. Just heavy. Deliberate. A shadow stepped into the firelight. Tall. Broad. Covered in armored plates of decaying flesh and metal bolts. Its eyes glowed dim red. What the hell is that? Jenna breathed. Leo's face turned pale. They called it a titan. The creature roared. And charged. End of Part 5. Part 6 title, Titan Awakens. Let me know when you're ready for Part 6. The fire scattered into sparks as the Titan crashed into the camp. Claire barely had time to scream, move, before the ground exploded beneath the weight of the creature's charge. Roke dove to the side, rolling behind a fallen log as the beast swung its massive arm, slamming into a tree and sending splinters flying like shrapnel. Claire raised her shotgun and fired twice, point blank. The slugs thudded into the thing's chest but barely slowed it. Its torso was covered in makeshift armor, scrap metal bolted into rotting flesh, soaked with something thick and black. Blood, or oil, or both. Leo scrambled toward the radio station bunker, dragging a dazed Peter behind him. That thing's a prototype, he yelled. It's not supposed to be out here. Jenna fired bursts from her rifle, aiming for the joints. The Titan flinched, but kept moving, eyes locked on Roke, who was baiting it away from the others. Over here, tin can. Roke shouted. He threw a rock and ducked as the Titan slammed its fists into the earth, creating a crater where Roke had just been. Dust choked the air. Claire and Marcus circled behind it. We go for the legs, she ordered. Bring it down. They moved together, Claire with a hatchet, Marcus with a blade scavenged from a downed soldier. As the Titan lifted its foot to crush Roke, Marcus rushed forward, slashing at the tendons just above the ankle. Claire followed, swinging the hatchet with everything she had. The creature howled. A sound not just of pain, but of rage. It turned. Scatter! Claire yelled. The Titan backhanded Marcus, sending him flying into a tree. He hit hard and didn't get up. Marcus! Jenna screamed, rushing toward him. Claire grabbed her arm. No! We get it down first. The Titan, now limping, swung wildly. Its blows cracked trees, tore roots from the ground, and sent shockwaves through the forest. It was slowing, but not enough. Leo emerged from the bunker with something metallic in his hands. A charge pack. Military grade. Claire! Catch! She caught the device and glanced at him. Stick it to the back of its head. Leo shouted. That's where the control implant is. It'll overload the system. Claire didn't hesitate. She sprinted toward the beast, zigzagging through debris. The Titan spotted her and roared, trying to pivot, but its injured leg gave out. It dropped to one knee. Claire leaped onto its back, grabbing onto exposed wires and rusted armor plates. The stench was unbearable, like burned rubber and rot. The Titan thrashed, but she climbed higher, reaching the base of its skull. She saw it, the implant, glowing blue beneath a layer of cracked, biometal plating. She slapped the charge onto it. The device beeped. Lights blinked red. Claire jumped off. Down, she screamed. The explosion was small but surgical, an electric shock blast that burst the implant and sent the Titan into a seizure. It writhed for a second, then collapsed face-first into the dirt. Silence. Just the sound of heavy breathing, distant moans, and the crackle of their dying fire. Claire stood slowly. Her body ached. Her hands were shaking. Jenna knelt by Marcus, checking his pulse. He's alive, she said, relieved. Ribs are broken. Maybe more. But he's breathing. Peter approached the Titan's body cautiously. That thing wasn't just a zombie. It was enhanced. programmed. Leo nodded grimly. It was one of 3 prototypes, designed for battlefield deployment. But they couldn't control them. So they shut them down. Or, they thought they did. Claire looked around. It didn't just wander here. It was sent. Roke sat down on a rock, clutching his bleeding arm. Which means someone at Site Omega knows we're coming. Leo met Claire's gaze. They're not just trying to survive anymore. They're playing God. As dawn approached, the group buried what was left of their supplies. Their food stash had been crushed. Their communications antenna shattered. But Marcus was stable, and the rest of them were alive. They had no choice but to continue on foot towards Site Omega. By mid-morning, they reached a ridge that overlooked a canyon. Below them, nestled among sheer cliffs and rusted fences, was a black facility, half buried, half burned. Solar panels gleamed in the sunlight. Drones hovered like insects above. Site Omega. Claire pulled binoculars from her pack. Through the glass, she could see movement, human figures in black armor, patrolling. Others moved strangely. Jerky. Controlled. She handed the binoculars to Roke. Controlled humans, he asked. Leo squinted. More likely volunteers. Or prisoners. Turned into test subjects. Claire stared at the facility. Her jaw clenched. They've turned survival into science. Now we turn the science to rubble. Peter looked skeptical. We're walking into a fortress with 4 able bodies and no backup. Roke smirked. Sounds about right. Jenna adjusted the pack on her shoulders. We go around the back. Through the service tunnels. Claire nodded. No more running. We end this. As they began their descent, none of them noticed the drone overhead silently tracking their movement. Inside Site Omega, behind layers of reinforced glass, a man in a white coat turned away from the monitor. He adjusted his gloves, watching the footage freeze on Claire's face. Prepare the others, he said to the assistant. We have guests. End of Part 6. Part 7 title, The Omega Breach. Let me know when you're ready for Part 7. The canyon air was thick with dust as Claire and her group descended towards Site Omega. The facility loomed beneath them like a buried secret, blackened and jagged against the broken landscape. Crumbling walls and rusted gates gave the illusion of abandonment, but they all knew better. Stay low, Claire whispered, crouching behind a fallen support beam near the outer perimeter. We don't know what sensors they've got running. Jenna peered through her rifle scope, scanning the compound. 2 guards by the west door. 1 patrolling the catwalks above. Human. Armed. Leo pulled a tablet from his satchel, the screen flickering with static. Their security system is old military tech. I can jam it for maybe 90 seconds, long enough to get us inside through the service tunnels, but not if we trip an alarm. Roke adjusted his grip on his pistol. His arm was still bandaged from the Titan fight, but he didn't complain. Then we go quiet. We go now. Claire nodded. Move. They crept through the brush, skirting rusted fences and twisted metal debris until they reached the service tunnel entrance, half buried behind a fallen generator. Leo pried the hatch open and dropped inside first, guiding the others one by one. The tunnel was narrow, reeking of mold and machine oil, but it led straight beneath Site Omega. The deeper they went, the colder it got. Pipes ran along the walls, some hissing, others silent. Distant thuds echoed, like footsteps above. Claire led the way, flashlight barely cutting through the dark. They reached a fork. Left led toward the power grid. Right, the labs. Claire made the call. We go right. They moved in silence, every step measured. At last, the tunnel opened into a storage room, dark, abandoned, crates stacked to the ceiling. Claire eased open the door into the corridor beyond. The fluorescent lights buzzed overhead. The sterile walls were covered in blood smears and claw marks. Not abandoned, Roke muttered. They crept forward. Glass windows revealed rooms filled with horrors, restrained corpses in surgical chairs, their skulls opened, machinery wired into their brains. Some were twitching. Others stared blankly at the ceiling, alive but broken. Jenna covered her mouth. "What the hell is this place?" "Research," Leo said grimly. They were testing how long zombies could retain memories, or be directed. Mind control trials. Claire looked through another window and froze. Inside, a girl, maybe 12, was strapped to a chair, wires leading from her temple to a blinking terminal. She was pale but conscious. Her lips moved, mouthing silent words. Claire turned to Leo. "Can you disable the lock?" Leo hesitated. "We don't have time." "Do it," Claire snapped. Leo nodded and plugged in his device. The door clicked open, and Claire rushed inside, kneeling beside the girl. "We're getting you out," she whispered. The girl's eyes met hers. "They hear everything," she whispered hoarsely. "They're watching." Leo yanked the wires free, and the girl winced but didn't scream. The lights flickered. Too late. A siren wailed. Red lights spun across the hallway. "They know we're here." Jenna shouted. Roke slammed the door shut and braced it with a chair. "We need an exit. Now." Leo pulled the girl close. "There's a ventilation corridor on sub-level 2. It leads to the hangar. If we reach it..." The wall exploded behind them. The group was thrown across the hallway as soldiers poured through the smoke, dressed in black, faces hidden behind visors, weapons drawn. But these weren't normal men. Their movements were too stiff, too synchronized. "Programmed," Leo gasped. Claire pulled the girl behind her and fired. Roke and Jenna joined in, covering fire, filling the corridor with echoes and screams. 2 soldiers fell. Then 3. But more kept coming. Claire grabbed a stun baton from a fallen soldier and slammed it into the nearest attacker's neck. Sparks flew. The man convulsed, dropping instantly. "This way," Leo called, leading them through a maintenance door and down a spiraling stairwell. Bullets pinged off metal as the group descended. Blood streaked the walls. The child held Claire's hand tightly, silent. On sub-level 2, they burst into a large lab, dark and full of broken containment tanks. One still hissed with gas. Something had escaped. From the corner of the room, a voice spoke. "Well done," it said. Cold. Calm. Mechanical. They turned. A figure emerged from the shadows, half man, half machine. His eyes glowed faint blue. Skin stretched thin over cybernetic plating. Wires ran from his neck down his spine. "You made it farther than expected," the man said. Claire Monroe. Survivor. Leader. Obstacle. Claire raised her weapon. "Who are you?" "I was Dr. Ellis. Now I am Control. And you are in my domain." He raised a hand, and the corpses in the lab began to stir. Zombies, enhanced with armor plating and neural implants. Their eyes blinked red. "You wanted a war," Control said. "Let me show you what evolution looks like." The light shut off. Darkness swallowed them. And the dead attacked. End of Part 7. Part 8 title, The Last Stand. Let me know when you're ready for Part 8, final part, full 795 words, emotional, action-packed, and satisfying. Part 8, The Last Stand. The darkness was suffocating, broken only by the blink of red lights from the reanimated horrors lurching forward. Claire gritted her teeth, shielding the girl with her body. The silence that followed Control's last words was shattered by the sound of metal claws scraping against the lab floor. Jenna fired the first shot. The bullet sparked off the armored skull of one of the cyber zombies, but it didn't slow. Roke lunged with a pipe he'd found, bashing the side of another monster's head. Sparks flew, wires snapped, and the thing crumpled, but 3 more replaced it. "They're everywhere!" Leo shouted. "We have to move now." Control stood calmly at the far end of the lab, watching like a conductor guiding his orchestra of death. "You were never meant to survive this," he said, voice echoing off the walls. "Humanity's time is over." Claire wasn't listening. Her focus was on survival, on protecting the girl, on giving her team even the slimmest chance of escape. "Leo," she barked, "you said there was a ventilation shaft." He pointed to the ceiling. "There. Above the server racks, vent leads to the outside." Claire turned to Jenna and Roke. "Hold them off." With the girl in her arms, Claire dashed across the lab toward the racks. The girl was trembling but silent, her eyes locked on Claire's face. "You're not gonna die here," Claire whispered. "Not today." Roke stood his ground near the door, his pistol blazing. One cyber zombie leapt at him and he met it midair with a crowbar to the neck. It snapped with a sickening crack. Jenna knelt beside the tanks, planting explosives she'd scavenged on the way in. "You want a war, freak," she snarled, wiring the last charge. "Here's your ending." Leo climbed a rolling scaffold and yanked open the ceiling vent. "It's tight but it leads out." "Go!" Claire hoisted the girl up and Leo helped pull her into the shaft. "You next," he told Claire. "Not yet," she said, turning back to the lab. Control began walking forward. "You persist out of delusion. Loyalty. Emotion. Weakness. Call it what you want," Claire growled, raising her rifle, "but I'm not letting you win." She opened fire, unloading everything she had into the server core behind him. Sparks flew, alarms blared. Control staggered as his systems glitched, then surged back to life. "Leo, blow the core!" Claire yelled. Leo threw a detonator toward the main console and hit the switch. The blast rocked the lab. Fire engulfed the back half of the room. A chunk of the ceiling collapsed. Control vanished in the flames, but Claire wasn't waiting to confirm. She pulled herself into the shaft as smoke filled the lab. Roke was last. He threw a final pipe bomb, sealing the door behind them. "Run," he shouted as the tunnel shook from the aftershock. The narrow shaft wound upward in suffocating darkness. Dust and smoke followed. Ahead, a faint blue light. Jenna kicked open a grate at the end of the tunnel, and they emerged into open air, onto the ravaged cliffs above Site Omega. The sun had begun to rise, casting orange across the horizon. They stumbled out, coughing, bleeding, exhausted. Behind them, the facility burned. Claire collapsed to her knees, holding the girl close. For the first time in days, she let herself breathe. Roke limped over and helped her to her feet. "Is it over?" Leo looked down into the canyon. "Maybe not. But we hurt them. We stopped, whatever that was." Jenna crouched beside Claire. "What now?" Claire looked at the girl, who sat quietly, watching the sun rise. "We rebuild," Claire said. "We tell people what happened here. We make sure no one ever repeats it." Roke nodded. "We find the others. The ones still fighting. We stand together." The girl reached into her pocket and handed Claire a small device, damaged, but still blinking. Leo took it and examined the screen. "It's a data drive," he said. "Coordinates. Names. Controls network." Claire stared at the blinking light, then at the horizon. "Then that's where we go next." They stood in silence for a moment, the wind whipping through the broken canyon, the sun finally washing the night away. Claire turned to her team, bloodied, bruised, but unbroken. "This isn't the end," she said. "It's just the beginning." Together, they walked away from the ruins, toward whatever came next. And behind them, Site Omega crumbled into the earth, its secrets buried, its monsters silenced. For now. End of Part 8. Let me know if you'd like a cinematic poster image prompt or a title card description for your YouTube thumbnail. Or, if you'd like to start a new zombie vs. human series.